In total, I have spent £1,000, which sounds crazy. Hi all, welcome back to Chlome. I hope you're doing well. In the last video we spoke all about the costs associated with buying my first home, and as promised I thought we'd spend today going through where the rest of my money went, which was on the renovation. I didn't have a lot of money left over. I only had a small amount of savings plus a lot of sweat equity and a lot of help from my family. And so I had to be really smart and really savvy with how I was just distributing my money and where it was going. And so I thought it'd be helpful to break it down and share that with you today. Before we get started actually, if you want, you can have a little guess in the comments below in terms of how much it all cost me before I give you the grand total at the end of this video. So why don't we go pretty much in order of start to finish in terms of how the jobs were done. First things first was gutting the house. Now I think you already know the answer to this because you would have seen the videos, especially in the early days, of me and my family literally demolishing everything. And so that cost me absolutely nothing. It was just a lot of hard work and extremely taxing. And I think that's something to note in terms of you can definitely do it yourself, especially if you're not planning to restore or keep anything because you're just almost smashing it out. But it is extremely laborious. It takes a lot of time and it's pretty much like going to the gym 5 times a week. So just bear that in mind. It definitely saved me a bit of money because the quotes were coming in at anywhere between £1,000 to £2,000 just to gut the property, and for me that was money that I could utilise elsewhere. So next up we have the electrics. This includes your first and your second fix. Typically your electrician will price you for his labour and or hers and their first fixes, and then you will have to provide your second. So first fixes are typically things like wiring, your back boxes for your sockets and so forth, and second fix are things like your sockets, your switches, your light pendants, etc. So altogether that came to roughly £4,000 for all the electrics. That's labour and materials. Next up we have the plumbing. Now the plumber will typically charge you for their labour and also their first fixes, and then you will pay for the second fixes. So in this instance it was things like the pipes. I went with copper pipes. I probably could have gotten away with plastic, but I was just trying to cover all bases and making sure that I was doing it to the best of my ability. I probably could have gotten away with just flushing the system as well, as opposed to running entirely new pipes, but you learn as you go, and I will do a separate video all on lessons learned. And then I was responsible for providing things like the radiators. I also factored into that price the cost to relocate my boiler from the kitchen to the new cupboard. All in all, that came to roughly £4,000 in total. So next we have the skimming. This one was a different one because I had someone in originally who didn't do an amazing job, and I had to bring someone else in to finish off the job and tidy up what that first person had started. So this price includes labour and materials for things like multi-finish, bonding, so forth, and that came to roughly £3,000, which I still think is a really good price. So up next we have the bathroom and the ensuite, which I absolutely love dearly. It's one of my favourite elements of the house. I need to preface this by saying the price I'm about to give doesn't include the carpentry associated with creating my ensuite. So this is purely for the tiles, the suites like the bath, the shower unit, the vanity unit and the screens and things like that. All of that came to approximately £3,500. I think that's a really good deal. So another big element of the house is the kitchen. Again, I wanted to be really cost effective. I wanted to find ranges that had discounts associated with it, but still looked very sleek, modern and aesthetically pleasing. My kitchen came to £3,000 thereabouts. I think that's an absolute steal. I'm still glad that I was able to get it for that price. So I'm sure I've shown you throughout the process, but I've had new external doors at the front and the back of the house by the kitchen with a side light. The total cost of those was about £2,000. So the carpentry was a little bit different because I had some things done by the builders and the carpenters and some elements done by myself in my DIY. So what I've tried to do here is price it based on things like skirting, architraves, internal doors, flooring, what am I missing, and maybe my DIY materials, stud walls of course, and that came to roughly £3,000, which isn't so bad actually when I was going through how much it costs for things like the flooring as well. I think that's all encompassing, not too bad. My carpet, so my carpet is something I did later on. It was probably one of the last things I did actually, and I'm so glad I did because it's just one of those things that you want to lay down last so it looks fresh, it's clean and so forth. And I got mine from Carpet for the carpet itself plus the actual fitting of it came to £410, which was brilliant. I only have carpet along the stairs and on the landing, which isn't a huge amount of space. When I went into the store, they have their discounted ranges all along the back, and I decided to check those out first, and I got really lucky with the colour because it was a colour I actually really wanted and works really well aesthetically with the rest of the house, the doors, the whole vibe. So again, I thought that was brilliant. That came to about £300, and I've still got loads left over by the way in the loft, which is insane. But when you purchase those last discounted amounts, they give it all to you and you have to pay for all of it. It still works out cheaper to do it that way. And then the labour for fitting the carpet was about £110, so all in all 410. So the painting was a little bit different. It didn't cost maybe as much as it could have, but that's purely because the main painting costs were probably the ones like the doors, banisters, the spindles, because I use specific colours for them in the Dulux range. But the rest of the house, honestly, it's just painted white, just because I never actually got round to painting all the walls, all the colours I was thinking of doing. And so it cost in total for things like mist coats and top coats and all my carpentry £400. Now furnishings were a little bit harder to cost up just because for the most part I did it over time, and so honestly it's just scattered all over my statement. So what I thought would be helpful was for me to kind of pull out one of the bigger furnishing costs, so things like my sofa, my beds, my wardrobes, coffee tables, mirrors, things like that. And in total that came to roughly £3,200, £3,100 to £3,200, which I think isn't so bad. For some reason I thought it was going to come out to way more at the time. Like I said, it doesn't include little bits like ornaments, plants, smaller bits that I've accumulated over time. This is purely the bigger ticket items. Sorry guys, completely forgot. I actually got my repointing done at the back of the house as well, which needed scaffolding to do so and was an additional £2,000, so factor that into the budget too. So if we count all of that up, it comes to roughly £28,500, which is really good actually, but something you absolutely need to factor in, and you would have seen from my videos, we did a lot ourselves. So that's a lot I've put into it labour wise, my family have put into it, and labour really does cost. My budget, which I don't think I spoke about up front, was £25,000, and I wanted to do everything £25,000 in, which may have been a little bit unrealistic in hindsight. And this was pre, I suppose, the market kind of going up and materials literally doubling and tripling in price. So a lot of that estimation was born out of the point in time we were in. Even so, I don't think 28,500 is too far off of it. Could have really racked up. But like I said, that's with us doing a lot of the work. So I think roughly if someone else was supposed to take it on from start to finish, labour only, or labour and, you know, some of those first and second fixed materials but no furnishings, I would say it would roughly cost £35,000 to £40,000 to do a house of this size. It's not a huge house at all, but even so, these things can be really costly, so definitely account for that. Or the other cost efficient way to do it is to live in it while you do it. Just make sure it's livable, so you have your basics in there, like your bathroom, your bedroom sorted, kitchen, and then take everything else room by room. So if we marry that with what I shared with you in the last video, my deposit was about £60,000 and my renovation almost £30,000. In total, I have spent £90,000, which sounds crazy, but I actually think it's been really worthwhile, and I've really tried to cut back on costs just to make it more affordable for myself. There's a huge amount of money for me to part with, but I do think it has been worthwhile. If you would find it useful, I'm more than happy to share things like purchase price, and then now what it has been revalued at. I've had it revalued a couple of times now because I'm always curious to see what it's done in terms of numbers, and I've built up a little bit of equity. So it's definitely something to consider if that's the path that you want to take. It's really hard nowadays to build your equity, and I think this is definitely a way in which you could pursue that if you choose to. Let me know in the comments if there's anything specific that you would want to know around this. I want this to be as beneficial as possible for you too. So let me know in the comments and we will plan our future videos together. As always, like, comment, subscribe, turn your notifications on, and I can't wait to catch up with you in the next video. Bye.